Seriously, it blows my mind that everyone isn't doing this. Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Michaela, and I'm so glad you're here because today we're going to be talking about 10 myths that might be stopping you from pitching yourself as a podcast guest. Appearing as a guest on other people's podcasts is one of the most powerful yet most underutilized strategies for growing a business, especially a health and wellness business. So if you've ever considered pitching yourself as a podcast guest and any of these pesky little myths has given you pause, I'm here to knock them out for you one by one. Myth number one, you've got to know the right people. No, you don't. Actually, you do need to know the right people, but it's not who you think. You need to know who you're trying to reach with your business, who can benefit most from what you have to share, and where are they currently hanging out online? Which podcasts are they and other people like them most likely to be tuning into already? You should also have some idea of who your professional neighbors are in your niche. These are people who are serving your dream clients, patients, and customers, but serving them in a different way than you do. And the important thing to note here is you don't have to actually know these individuals already personally. You just need to have a sense of who they might be. I shared more about that in this video, so I'll link it below so you can check it out. Myth number two, you need fancy equipment to get started. Again, no, you don't. While you may want to invest in some basic equipment like an external mic or some headphones, I'll link the ones that I like below. Really, the main thing is that you take reasonable steps to improve the quality of the audio on your end of the podcast interview. And you might be surprised, you can set up a pretty great quality sound booth for yourself just by finding a closet in your home and pulling together some towels or blankets to muffle the sound. It's humble, but it works. Myth number three, you need podcast experience before you can pitch yourself as a guest. Now, I'm going to challenge you on this one because if this were true, no one would ever pitch themselves. You have to start somewhere, right? And as a health and wellness professional, you have an array of related experiences, even if you've never been a guest on anyone's podcast. Think about the work you do. Think about the myriad conversations you have with all kinds of different people every single day. Think about presentations you've given, either in your training or as a professional out in the world. Think about this past year, talks that you may have given on Zoom or lectures. If you've taught courses, if you've volunteered your time presenting to groups pro bono, really stretch yourself here, and pretty soon you'll be able to come up with a whole list of relevant experiences you've had. And these lend themselves really nicely to guesting on podcasts. So don't sell yourself short. So let's start your brainstorming right now. Tell me in the comments, what kinds of experiences have you had so far that might translate to a podcast conversation? And if you're truly stumped, go ahead and type help in the comments and we'll see if we can help get your wheels turning. Myth number four, podcast appearances are only for fame seekers who want to build a massive following. Now, this is a really common myth that I've encountered, and I think it's totally based on a misunderstanding of the primary goal of being a guest on someone's podcast. A lot of times you'll hear people talk about using podcast interviews as a way to get your name out there. And while that's technically true, the goal is not to just amass a huge following. That may be one of the outcomes of doing a lot of different podcast appearances, but the real goal, the only one we actually care about here, is leveraging someone else's existing platform, one of your professional allies, in order to expand your reach into new pockets of the population where your dream clients, patients, and customers already are, serve them well on the episode, and then strategically direct them back to your online home where they can learn about everything that you have to offer to serve them well. That's the deal. That's what we're going for. And so do your best to get that idea out of your head. It's not for attention seekers. It's for health and wellness professionals. It's for you and for me. It's for all of us. Myth number five, you got to clear your entire schedule to make this happen. You got to treat it like a full-time job. This is absolutely untrue. And one of the reasons why I love podcast pitching so much is that it's flexible. It can be as intensive as you'd like it to be. So let's say, for example, that you want to make this the focus of your marketing efforts in the next quarter or in the next year. you could launch a full-scale push to be your own podcast PR person, pitch as many different podcasts as you can, and really, truly block out time in your schedule to direct your efforts toward this. And really block out significant time in your schedule to devote to this. Or you could take a completely different approach and casually dip a toe in the podcast waters. For instance, you might decide, I'm up for doing 1 or 2 podcast interviews in the next 6 months. You can use that as your guide and work backwards to decide how many podcasts you want to pitch, how intensively you want to work on this now. It can take up as much or as little of your time and your headspace and your effort as you like. There's freedom. Myth number 6, you have to have the entire interview planned out and scripted ahead of time before you pitch. This is another beautiful benefit of podcast interviews. Unlike a lecture or a video where it might be helpful to script out what you're going to say ahead of time, a podcast conversation is just that. It's a natural dialogue that unfolds organically, and so you really can't script it ahead of time. Remember, there's a host that you're going to be talking with, and so there's a give and a take. As we'll talk about in the next video, one of the qualities that separates the truly outstanding podcast guests is the ability to come prepared but stay open, flexible, ready to go wherever the conversation takes you. Myth number 7, you have to be a total super fan of any podcast that you pitch. Now here it really comes down to quality and authenticity. It's impossible to be a super fan of every podcast you could possibly pitch, and that's not the kind of thing you can fake. So what matters most is some strategic preparation, doing your homework ahead of time to get to know something about the podcast before you pitch it so that you can be thoughtful and customize your pitch. That's what's really going to make the difference, not checking the box of having listened to every single episode they've ever recorded. Myth number 8, you have to tell your entire life story. No, I promise. You do not have to share anything more than you're comfortable sharing as a podcast guest. But a big part of what makes a podcast interview such a unique content marketing opportunity is that you have the time and the space to share some truly valuable information and education with podcast listeners, while also effortlessly pulling in pieces of your own story or the story of your business or your brand. It is a really unique way to communicate some information without it coming across as dry. When you can educate and share together in one conversation, this is the sweet spot that true podcast listeners love. And so don't worry, it's not a tell-all or an expose. It's about being of service. Myth number 9, I have nothing unique or important or valuable to share. And we tend to get hung up on this for some reason. I think it's because we worry this isn't going to be enough of a show for podcast listeners. But the message that you have to share with a podcast audience is no different than the message that you're probably already sharing elsewhere online, on your social media posts, blog, YouTube videos, wherever you are currently creating free, valuable content for your audience. It's the same exact thing on a podcast. Now, if part of what you're feeling a little insecure about is the thought of putting yourself out there, being vulnerable, recording the podcast episode, and then crickets, it just falls flat and no one cares. First of all, you don't need to worry about that. That rarely, if ever, happens. There's always an audience for your podcast episode. Plus, remember, these live on in perpetuity, which means at any time, someone searching for the topic that you're sharing about could discover, brand new, your podcast episode. But the other encouragement is that the podcast host and their audience and their promotion efforts is just one piece of the puzzle. You share that responsibility and that opportunity to repurpose content from your episode to help put it out there in different ways. So really, friend, don't worry. You have a lot to share, and share it, you will. And finally, myth number 10, you have to have the right personality. Nope, it's come as you are. Part of what makes podcasts so fascinating as a medium is the wide array of personalities and perspectives they pull together. By no means should you be trying to manufacture some larger-than-life personality. Just come as you are, bring your genuine self, and trust that it's going to connect with the right people. Now, regardless of personality, there are some key qualities that make for a truly outstanding podcast guest. And the next video, I'm going to share what they are. And if you're ready to dive in there and try out this podcast pitching thing for yourself, then check out the link below and sign up for my free on-demand video training that'll set you up with everything you need to get started. If you found this video useful, please give it a like. That'll help others find it, and it'll let me know that you want more videos on this same topic. Thanks so much for being here. Meet me back here every Tuesday for more communication tips to help you preach what you practice. Bye.